Hello everyone, and welcome back to a new video. So today I'm going to be sharing with you all of my art supplies, and starting off we're doing traditional. This is my sketchbook. I use it for most of my videos currently as of 2023. It's from Artist Loft, and I got it at my local Michael's, which is just a craft store where I live. Then next up, I'm going to be showing you my fine lining pen, which is a Micron 0.1. It's one of the smallest sizes, I believe. I just enjoy it for all of my detailed line work, and I like how it flows and it inks. Next up, I'm going to be showing you my markers. Here I have my Copic sketch markers. They're the portrait. It's a skin tone set because I was lacking a few in my other set of markers, which I'll get to. This is also a Copic marker N5 because I needed a gray because my current one was running out. And for my markers, I have my Ohuhu 48 set. This is the baseline sketch just about when they first launched. I've had this for about 3 or 4 years now. And they're just really good markers, brush tip and chisel tip, and they work really well for my workflow. I usually use this in my sketchbook. And then moving on, you are going to see on screen my next art supply as I grab it. These are my colored pencils. They are Art 101. I got them as a gift years ago. A lot of my art supplies are kind of old because I enjoy using them until they run out, just because it's more cost effective and it just has a lot of nostalgia attached to it when you use something for so long and you're comfortable with it. Moving on from that is my favorite pencil that is kind of beat up. It is a Z-grip with 0.7mm lead. I just find 0.7 easier because it doesn't break as fast as like 0.5, just my preferred. And now we're moving on to digital. This is my iPad. It's a 6th generation mini. Using Procreate and the Apple Pencil Gen 2. I got this as a gift from my mom, so shout out to her, she's amazing. And we're gonna go straight into my brushes. So for my digital art, as I said, I use Procreate, and I'm gonna be taking you through my library of brushes in a folder called Mine. Basically, these are just all the brushes that I use on a consistent or somewhat consistent basis. And starting off, we're doing the 6B pencil. You can find this default in Procreate in the sketching section. And it's a good pencil if you want a lot of flow, if you want a bit of texture. I don't use this as often, and you'll see me put examples on the screen of art that I have done. And it's just really good for opacity, good for pressure. It feels like an HB pencil that you'd get like at school. That's an example right there of how I like to use it. And usually I use it with opacity just so I can get even more variation in my darkness. It's just a personal preference. So you'll see me do a few swatches, mess around, sorry, with the brushes, so you are able to see their texture, how they seem to flow. This next one is my Good Boy brush, which is a brush that I custom made myself. It's very similar to the medium hard brush in the airbrushing category default with Procreate. I'm not sure if I'll ever show the actual code to this brush unless you all request it, and then maybe I will. I basically use this brush for everything. I use it for sketching, for coloring, as you can see on screen right now, and yeah, that's where you can find it, in airbrushing, the medium brush. Oh yeah, just medium, not medium hard. But I use this for sketching, for coloring, for shading. I use it for most gradients. I can blend with it pretty well. If I need to adjust the opacity, then I do so, but for the most part, I use it at full opacity. And the name is just kind of silly. I made this brush up years ago, so it's just a fun little name that I like. Then the soft brush is basically supposed to mimic sort of Gaussian blur, but manually in Procreate. It's just your standard airbrush. You can find it in the airbrushing section, default with Procreate once again. And, you know, it's just good for glow. It's good for blending things out. I usually only use it for bigger areas where I know my Good Boy brush doesn't reach. It's just easier for me to maintain. It's very soft, has a lot of opacity. I don't really use it for anything else besides gradients or large fills that I need to be sort of blurry. And then moving on from that brush, we are going to go into my technical pen. Now, some of the brushes in this category I don't use as often, just because I found other brushes that work better or are suited to my workflow now. So the technical pen, is more like that for me. It's just your standard, has a slight variation of pressure sensitivity, which just means the harder I press, the bigger it gets, the less I press, the smaller it gets, that sort of thing. It's a good standard inking brush, and I have a lot of inking brushes in this category, but you will see me flip-flop between many of them during art pieces. It's just what I like to use. All around a good inking brush. Now moving on from this canvas, I'm going to clear my canvas so you can see the next brushes, I'm going to be doing the Gensink ink brush, which by the way, Technical Pen and Gensink ink brush are both in the inking category, and then the next one you'll see is going to be in the calligraphy category. Most, if not all, of the brushes I use in Procreate are default, except for maybe like 4 brushes, and 2 of them you're going to see in this specific one. I really like the Gensink ink. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that completely wrong. Those words don't make sense in my brain. But it's just like an even better technical pen with a bit more of a pixely texture. You can kind of see it. When I zoom in, it's kind of hard to see. So if I do other videos or examples and I use this brush, I'll try to point out its texture. I don't really use textured inking brushes often just because I love the sleek, clean look of a nice inking brush, and that's exactly what Script is. Script is currently the lining brush that I use the most, and it has opacity with no texture, and you'll see as I put in examples here too. I do have stabilization on just for a personal preference. You can turn that on in your settings, and you can see that this brush is actually somewhat transparent. You'll see as I zoom in here and write opacity. The harder you press, the bigger and darker the brush is, and the softer or lighter you press, the smaller and lighter the brush is. That's just how it ends up working. It comes default in Procreate, as I said. It's in the calligraphy section. I think it's towards the bottom, and I really like it. It's a good brush for lining, so if you're looking for something like that. Then Fine Tip and Fine Tip 1 are default. They come in the inking section of Procreate. I did a bit of finagling with them just to make them more my preference. And that's just me. I don't really use these brushes anymore. You can see on screen how they work. It's just a flat brush that sort of just doesn't have any variation whatsoever. And I just want to make the disclaimer that just because I use these brushes, it may not guarantee your art looks like these if you also use these brushes. I just want to share my personal preferences because I think it's fun. This next brush I actually don't use a ton unless I'm doing rendered pieces, which you'll see the round brush later. The flat brush is basically a super tiny brush that I use whenever I need to do fine details. It has a bit of texture, as you'll see when I zoom in. It's just all around a good brush. I don't use it super often. It's very contingent on whatever I'm working on at the time, and you'll see just if you mess around with these brushes in Procreate, there's a ton of different ways to, use them. And even if you're not using Procreate, I am familiar with IBIS Paint X as well. I know they have tons of QR codes out there of how to use and make and, create with brushes out there. And Procreate, there's tons of resources out there that you can download as well that can benefit you in any sort of way. These are just the brushes I like to use and the ones that are most frequent. And I only showed you one of my categories, which was the mine category. I also have my comic supplies folder, which it's basically Technical Pen because I like it for inking comics fast. It has my Good Boy brush for coloring, and it has my paintbrush, which you'll see a little bit after this, that I use for backgrounds, which I'll put in an example when that comes up as well. My paintbrush I did make myself. It's just a rectangle brush. It's based off of the round brush, just in a rectangle, or I guess a square. You can see that it's kind of streaky, kind of opacity based. It's just all around a brush that I like to use to quickly fill in large areas, especially if I want that square texture. It's just all around a good brush. I like it. And then for the final brush, which is the hard round brush, or just the round brush, this comes default in Procreate. You can find it, I believe, in the painting section or the artistry section. It's just a kind of your default circular brush that has opacity. I've used this in a couple of pieces. Here's your example here on screen. And yeah, that's basically all of my brushes. I wanted to take you guys through a tour, so I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!